Title: What happens when Cinderella meets her godmother once upon a time, nestled in a faraway land beyond rolling hills and majestic mountains, there lay a picturesque countryside dotted with blooming meadows and vibrant fields. In a quaint little cottage at the edge of a sprawling field lived a young woman named Cinderella. She was kind-hearted and radiant, with eyes that sparkled like the morning dew and a smile that could warm even the coldest hearts. Yet, her days were often filled with toil and tears, for she was at the mercy of her cruel stepmother and stepsisters. It was a life of unending chores and unspoken sorrow. From the break of dawn until the stars claimed the sky, Cinderella scrubbed, swept, and served. Her hands bore the marks of her labor, yet her spirit remained unbroken. Though her stepmother and stepsisters treated her with disdain, she never let bitterness take root in her heart. Instead, she found solace in the beauty of the world around her, the rustling of the trees, the chirping of the birds, and the gentle whisper of the wind through the wildflowers. Cinderella often dreamed of a life beyond her little cottage. She imagined herself dancing in grand ballrooms, wearing gowns as radiant as the sun, surrounded by laughter and joy. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into years, her dreams seemed as distant as the stars above. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky was painted in hues of gold and lavender, Cinderella found herself in the garden, her favorite place of refuge. She knelt among the flowers, her hands brushing over the soft petals as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Why must my life be so hard?" she whispered to the twilight, her voice barely audible over the hum of crickets. Just as she spoke, a soft glow began to shimmer in the air around her. Startled, she wiped her tears and looked up. The glow grew brighter, swirling like 1,000 tiny fireflies, until it coalesced into the form of a woman. She was unlike anyone Cinderella had ever seen. Her silver hair cascaded like moonlight, and her gown sparkled as though woven from the stars themselves. "Do not despair, dear child," the woman said, her voice gentle and soothing. "I am your fairy godmother, and I have come to help you." Cinderella's eyes widened in disbelief. "Help me? But how?" The fairy godmother smiled warmly. "With a little bit of magic and a whole lot of faith." With a wave of her wand, the garden was transformed into a scene of wonder. A plump pumpkin grew and shimmered until it became a golden carriage. Mice scurried forward and, with a flick of the wand, turned into magnificent horses. Her tattered dress glowed and shifted, becoming a gown of unparalleled beauty, and on her feet appeared glass slippers that sparkled with every movement. Cinderella gasped, unable to find words. "Go to the ball, my dear," the fairy godmother said. "But remember, the magic will fade at midnight. Make the most of your time." Cinderella nodded, her heart racing with excitement and gratitude. She stepped into the carriage, her dreams no longer distant but within reach. As the horses galloped into the night, she looked back and saw her fairy godmother waving, her figure glowing softly under the moonlight. This was the beginning of a night that would change her life forever, a night where magic, courage, and love would intertwine to create a story for the ages. Despite her hardships, Cinderella found solace in the beauty of nature. She would often wander into the fields, letting the gentle breeze caress her face and listening to the cheerful chirping of birds. It was during one such walk that her life took an extraordinary turn. One golden afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm amber glow across the countryside, Cinderella ventured into the fields. The tall grass swayed like waves, and wildflowers of every hue painted the landscape in vibrant splashes of color. The world felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos and cruelty she endured at home. Cinderella closed her eyes and tilted her face to the sky, letting the soft breeze carry away her worries, even if only for a moment. She hummed a melody, a tune her mother had sung to her long ago, and the birds seemed to join in, their songs harmonizing with her own. As she wandered deeper into the meadow, she noticed something unusual, a faint glimmer amidst the grass. Curious, she followed the light until she came upon a small, sparkling orb floating just above the ground. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, casting a soft glow that bathed the surrounding flowers in silver light. Cinderella knelt down, captivated by the mysterious light. As she reached out to touch it, the orb expanded, glowing brighter and brighter until it enveloped her entirely. She shielded her eyes, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and wonder. When the light faded, Cinderella found herself face to face with a woman unlike any she had ever seen. The woman was ethereal, with a presence that seemed to command both awe and comfort. Her gown shimmered like liquid moonlight, and her eyes held a timeless wisdom. "Do not be afraid, my child," the woman said, her voice soft and melodic. "I am your fairy godmother, and I have been watching over you." Cinderella blinked, struggling to comprehend what was happening. "My fairy godmother," she echoed, her voice trembling. The woman nodded, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "You have endured so much with grace and kindness, even when faced with cruelty. Tonight, your life will change. I am here to grant you the chance to attend the royal ball, where your dreams may finally come true." Cinderella's eyes widened. "The royal ball? But how? I have nothing to wear, no way to go." The fairy godmother raised her wand, its tip glowing with an otherworldly light. "Leave that to me," she said with a wink. With a wave of her wand, the meadow transformed into a scene of enchantment. A nearby pumpkin grew and twisted, becoming a magnificent golden carriage. The mice that had been scurrying at Cinderella's feet turned into proud white horses, their manes flowing like silk. Her tattered dress shimmered and shifted, becoming a gown of breathtaking beauty, adorned with jewels that sparkled like stars. On her feet appeared glass slippers, delicate yet unbreakable. Cinderella stared in awe, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The fairy godmother placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Remember, my dear, the magic will only last until midnight. Make the most of this opportunity." With a grateful heart and a newfound sense of hope, Cinderella stepped into the carriage. As it began to roll toward the palace, she glanced back at her fairy godmother, who stood amidst the wildflowers, her figure glowing softly in the twilight. This was the moment her life began to change, a journey from despair to destiny, guided by the magic of hope and the strength of her own kind heart. The fateful encounter one golden afternoon, as Cinderella strolled through the meadow, she noticed a peculiar glimmer near the edge of the forest. Curious, she approached the shimmering light and was startled to find an elegant woman standing there. The woman wore a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and her silver hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Cinderella froze in place, her heart racing. The woman radiated an otherworldly presence, her very being exuding warmth and serenity. Despite her surprise, Cinderella felt no fear, only a deep, inexplicable sense of comfort, as though she were in the presence of someone who truly understood her. The elegant woman smiled, her eyes twinkling like the night sky. "Do not be alarmed, my dear," she said, her voice as soothing as a lullaby. "I have been watching over you, waiting for the right moment to appear." Cinderella blinked, her curiosity overcoming her initial hesitation. Who are you?" she asked softly. I am your fairy godmother, the woman replied, her smile widening. And I have come to help you. Cinderella's breath caught in her throat. Help me? But why? I'm just me, she said, glancing down at her worn dress and calloused hands. The fairy godmother stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Cinderella's shoulder. Because you have a heart that shines brighter than any jewel, my dear. Despite all the hardships you've endured, you've remained kind, hopeful, and true to yourself. That is a rare and precious gift. Tears welled up in Cinderella's eyes as the woman's words sank in. For so long, she had felt invisible, her dreams dismissed as foolish and unattainable. Yet here was someone who saw her, who believed in her worth. The fairy godmother stepped back, raising her wand, which sparkled like a comet's tail. Tonight, you shall go to the royal ball, she declared. And you shall have everything you need to make your dreams come true. With a wave of her wand, the meadow around them came alive with magic. A nearby pumpkin grew larger and larger until it transformed into a golden carriage, its surface gleaming in the sunlight. Mice scurried from the underbrush, and with a flick of the wand, they became majestic white horses, their coats shimmering like pearls. Cinderella gasped as her own tattered dress began to change. The fabric glowed and shifted, becoming a gown of unparalleled beauty, its every thread shimmering as though spun from moonlight. On her feet appeared delicate glass slippers, so fine they seemed almost weightless. She looked down at herself, then back at the fairy godmother, her voice trembling with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. The fairy godmother smiled gently. There's no need for thanks, my dear. Just remember, this magic will fade at midnight. Use this time wisely, and trust in your heart. As the carriage pulled up beside her, Cinderella stepped inside, her heart filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. She turned to look back at the fairy godmother, who stood watching her with a look of pride and encouragement. The carriage began to move, and as the wind carried her toward the palace, Cinderella felt a newfound sense of hope. For the first time in her life, she believed that her dreams were within reach, and that magic, both in the world and within herself, could make anything possible. Who are you? Cinderella asked, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and apprehension. The woman smiled warmly. My dear child, I am your fairy godmother. Cinderella's eyes widened. Fairy godmother? But why have you come to me? Because, my sweet girl, your kindness and resilience have not gone unnoticed. It's time you received the happiness you so richly deserve, the fairy godmother replied. Cinderella's eyes filled with tears at the fairy godmother's words. No one had ever spoken to her with such warmth and sincerity. For so long, she had felt invisible, her efforts and dreams buried beneath the weight of endless chores and cruelty. Yet here was someone who saw her, not for her rags, but for her heart. Do you really think I deserve it? Cinderella whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The fairy godmother stepped closer, her expression tender. More than anyone, my dear, she said, gently brushing a tear from Cinderella's cheek. You have endured so much, yet you've never let bitterness take root. Your heart has remained pure, and that is a rare and precious gift. It's time the world saw the beauty within you, just as I do. Cinderella nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Thank you, she murmured, her voice barely audible. The fairy godmother raised her wand, its tip glowing like a star. Now, let's make some magic, she said with a playful smile. With a graceful wave, the world around them transformed. The pumpkin at the edge of the meadow grew and shimmered, its orange skin turning to gold as it became a magnificent carriage. The mice nearby squeaked in surprise as they were lifted into the air, their small forms elongating and reshaping into elegant white horses. Cinderella gasped as her own dress began to change. The fabric shimmered and shifted, the tattered rags dissolving into a gown of breathtaking beauty. It sparkled with every movement, as though it were adorned with 1,000 tiny stars. On her feet appeared delicate glass slippers, their translucent beauty catching the light. She looked down at herself, then back at the fairy godmother, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. The fairy godmother smiled warmly. "And it's all for you, my sweet girl. But remember," she added, her tone turning serious, "the magic will fade at midnight. Make the most of this opportunity, and trust in your heart to guide you." Cinderella nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I will," she promised. As the carriage rolled up beside her, Cinderella stepped inside, her heart pounding with excitement and hope. She glanced back at the fairy godmother, who stood watching her with a look of pride and encouragement. "Go, my dear," the fairy godmother said, her voice soft yet firm. "Your destiny awaits." And with that, Cinderella's journey toward a brighter future began, carried by the magic of her fairy godmother and the strength of her own unwavering spirit. A magical transformation. With a wave of her shimmering wand, the fairy godmother transformed Cinderella's ragged dress into a breathtaking gown. The fabric sparkled like diamonds, and the soft blue hue complemented her radiant complexion. Her worn-out shoes were replaced with delicate glass slippers that glimmered with every step she took. Cinderella stared down at herself in astonishment, her hands trembling as they brushed over the luxurious fabric of her gown. It felt impossibly soft, like a whisper against her skin, and it shimmered as if it had captured the light of 1,000 stars. She turned slightly, watching the dress flow and sparkle with her movements, its elegance unlike anything she had ever dared to imagine. Her eyes then fell to her feet, now adorned with the most exquisite slippers she had ever seen. The glass seemed almost ethereal, catching and refracting the light in delicate rainbows. Despite their delicate appearance, they felt sturdy, as though they were made just for her. I don't know what to say," Cinderella stammered, her voice choked with emotion. The fairy godmother smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "You don't need to say anything, my dear," she said. "Your joy is thanks enough." "But how can this be real?" Cinderella asked, glancing between the gown, the slippers, and the radiant woman before her. "Magic, my sweet girl," the fairy godmother replied, giving her wand a playful twirl. "And a little belief in yourself." Cinderella took a deep breath, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. For the first time in her life, she felt like the person she had always dreamed of being, confident, beautiful, and free. The fairy godmother gestured toward the gleaming carriage waiting nearby, its golden frame catching the last rays of the setting sun. "Now, my dear, it's time for you to go to the ball. The world is waiting to see the wonderful person you are." Cinderella hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the door of the carriage. "What if they don't see me for who I truly am?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The fairy godmother stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Cinderella's shoulder. "They will, my child. Because the magic is not just in the dress or the carriage, it's in you. You've had it all along. This is simply your chance to let it shine." With those words, Cinderella smiled, her confidence bolstered by the fairy godmother's unwavering belief in her. She stepped into the carriage, her heart racing with excitement and hope. As the horses began to trot away, Cinderella looked back at the fairy godmother, who stood in the meadow, her figure glowing softly against the twilight sky. "Thank you," Cinderella called out, her voice filled with emotion. "Go, my dear," the fairy godmother replied with a wave. "And remember, the magic will fade at midnight. Make every moment count." And so, Cinderella's journey to the royal ball began, her heart alight with the promise of magic, destiny, and the hope of a brighter future. "Oh, it's beautiful!" Cinderella exclaimed, twirling in delight. "Thank you, fairy godmother." "But that's not all," the fairy godmother said with a twinkle in her eye. She turned to a nearby pumpkin and, with another wave of her wand, transformed it into a grand carriage. For mice from the field became magnificent white horses, and a friendly old dog was turned into a dignified coachman. Cinderella watched in awe as the ordinary objects and creatures around her were transformed into a scene of splendor. The once humble pumpkin now gleamed as a grand golden carriage, its intricate details shimmering in the soft glow of twilight. The mice, now proud and elegant white horses, pawed at the ground with energy, their manes flowing like silk. The old dog, who had always been her quiet companion, stood tall and regal as a coachman, dressed in a fine suit with a polished top hat. He gave Cinderella a knowing smile, his familiar warmth unchanged despite his new form. Cinderella turned to the fairy godmother, her hands clasped over her heart. "This is incredible," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." The fairy godmother chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling with delight. "There's no need for thanks, my dear. Tonight is your night. The magic is simply giving you the chance you've always deserved." "But what if something goes wrong?" Cinderella asked, a hint of doubt creeping into her voice. The fairy godmother stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Cinderella's shoulder. "Nothing will go wrong as long as you stay true to yourself. Remember, my dear, it's not the gown or the carriage that makes you special, it's your kind heart and resilient spirit." Cinderella nodded, a newfound determination shining in her eyes. The fairy godmother gestured toward the carriage. "Now, go. The royal ball awaits, and who knows what wonders the night may bring." Cinderella took a deep breath and stepped into the carriage, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. She glanced back at the fairy godmother, who stood watching her with a proud smile. "And don't forget," the fairy godmother called out, her voice light yet firm, "the magic will fade at midnight. Make the most of this gift, my dear." As the carriage began to roll forward, drawn by the majestic horses, Cinderella felt a surge of hope and possibility. For the first time in her life, she believed that her dreams might actually come true. The fairy godmother watched until the carriage disappeared into the horizon, a knowing smile on her lips. "Go, my sweet girl," she murmured to the quiet meadow. "Your destiny awaits. Now, my dear, you shall attend the royal ball at the castle," the fairy godmother declared. "But remember, the magic will only last until the stroke of midnight." The royal ball, the castle, perched atop a hill overlooking the valley, was a sight to behold. Its towering spires and grand halls glowed under the moonlight. As Cinderella arrived, the entire court was captivated by her ethereal beauty. The prince, a charming young man with an infectious smile, was immediately drawn to her. The castle seemed like something out of a dream, its majestic silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the moon and the flickering light of countless torches. The spires reached toward the heavens, and the grand stained glass windows cast colorful reflections onto the cobblestone paths below. Music and laughter spilled out into the night air, filling the valley with a sense of magic and festivity. As Cinderella's golden carriage approached the castle gates, the guards, dressed in their finest regalia, stepped aside in awe, bowing deeply. The carriage came to a stop, and Cinderella stepped out, her shimmering gown catching the light and making her appear as though she were made of starlight. Gasps of admiration rippled through the crowd gathered outside, and whispers of her beauty spread like wildfire. Inside the grand hall, the ball was in full swing. The opulent room was adorned with crystal chandeliers, gilded columns, and lavish decorations. Nobles and dignitaries from far and wide mingled, their laughter and chatter blending with the enchanting music of the orchestra. When Cinderella entered, everything seemed to pause. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to her. She moved gracefully, her glass slippers glinting with each step. Her beauty was not just in her appearance but in the quiet confidence and kindness that radiated from her. The prince, standing at the far end of the hall, was immediately captivated. He was a striking young man, with a charming smile that could light up any room and a demeanor that exuded warmth and sincerity. His eyes locked onto Cinderella's, and for a moment, the noise and commotion of the ball faded into the background. He made his way through the crowd, his gaze never leaving hers. As he approached, Cinderella felt her heart race, but she stood tall, her natural grace shining through. When he reached her, he bowed slightly and extended his hand. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. "I don't believe we've met before. May I have the honor of this dance?" Cinderella hesitated for a brief moment, her cheeks flushing slightly, before placing her hand in his. "It would be my pleasure," she replied softly. The orchestra struck up a new melody, and the prince led her to the center of the dance floor. As they began to waltz, the entire court watched in awe. The two moved as though they were meant to dance together, their steps perfectly in sync. It was as if the world had faded away, leaving only the two of them in their own magical bubble. As the night went on, the prince and Cinderella talked and laughed, their connection growing deeper with every passing moment. Cinderella felt a joy she had never known, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a brighter future. Little did she know, the magic of this night would soon be tested, and the bond she was forming with the prince would prove to be stronger than any spell. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Cinderella hesitated for a moment before placing her hand in his. "I'd be honored." As they danced, the prince and Cinderella shared laughter and stories, discovering a mutual love for simple joys like the countryside and stargazing. Their connection was instant and undeniable, and for the first time in her life, Cinderella felt truly seen and cherished. A comedic twist as the evening wore on, Cinderella's stepsisters, unaware of her true identity, attempted to gain the prince's attention with increasingly absurd antics. One sister tripped over her elaborate gown while attempting a curtsy, while the other accidentally spilled punch on a dignitary. The guests couldn't help but chuckle, and even Cinderella and the prince shared a laugh. The grand hall buzzed with excitement and amusement as the stepsisters unwittingly became the center of attention, but not in the way they had hoped. Their desperate attempts to catch the prince's eye were growing more outlandish by the minute. The first stepsister, determined to showcase her grace, attempted an elaborate curtsy. Unfortunately, her overly ornate gown, weighed down by layers of unnecessary embellishments, proved too much to handle. She lost her balance and toppled backward, landing in a rather undignified heap. Gasps of surprise quickly turned into polite chuckles from the guests, and the prince, trying to suppress a smile, glanced at Cinderella, who covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. Not to be outdone, the second stepsister decided to demonstrate her charm by engaging in lively conversation with a visiting dignitary. However, her enthusiasm got the better of her, and with a dramatic wave of her hand, she accidentally knocked over a goblet of punch. The vibrant red liquid splashed across the dignitary's immaculate attire, leaving him sputtering in shock. The room fell silent for a moment before a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Cinderella, standing beside the prince, couldn't help but giggle at the scene. "They certainly know how to make an impression," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. The prince chuckled, his gaze fixed on her. "Indeed," he replied. "Though I must admit, none of their efforts have quite the same effect as your smile." Cinderella felt her cheeks flush, but before she could respond, the orchestra struck up another tune, and the prince extended his hand. "Shall we dance again?" he asked, his voice warm and inviting. She nodded, placing her hand in his, and together they returned to the dance floor. As they moved in perfect harmony, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. The laughter and antics of her stepsisters became a distant memory, replaced by the joy of the moment and the connection she felt with the prince. Meanwhile, the stepsisters, oblivious to Cinderella's presence and her growing bond with the prince, continued their clumsy attempts to steal the spotlight. Little did they know, the true star of the evening was the very person they had underestimated and mistreated for so long. The midnight escape. As the clock began to strike midnight, Cinderella suddenly remembered the fairy godmother's warning. "I must go," she exclaimed, pulling away from the prince. The moment the first chime of midnight echoed through the castle, a wave of panic swept over Cinderella. Her heart raced as the fairy godmother's warning rang in her ears: "The magic will fade at midnight." She glanced at the clock on the wall, its hands nearing the hour, and realized with a shock that time was running out. "I must go," she exclaimed, her voice filled with urgency. She quickly pulled away from the prince, who looked at her in confusion, his brow furrowing in concern. "Cinderella, wait," he called out, reaching for her hand. But she was already moving toward the door, her steps quick and hurried. The prince followed her, calling her name, but Cinderella didn't dare to stop. She had no choice but to leave before the magic vanished entirely. As she neared the grand staircase, her heart ached with the knowledge that she couldn't stay, no matter how much she longed to. Her glass slippers clicked sharply against the marble floor, and as she took the final step toward the door, disaster struck. One of her slippers slipped off her foot and landed on the stairs, its delicate glass glimmering under the dimming light. She barely noticed, too focused on escaping the looming deadline. The prince, now fully aware of the situation, rushed forward. "Please, don't go," he implored, his voice filled with both confusion and desperation. But Cinderella, her heart heavy, turned to him one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I must go." With a final, regretful glance, she fled through the castle's grand doors, her heart aching as she ran into the night. The magic had begun to fade, and with each passing second, the world around her seemed to shift. The shimmering gown began to lose its luster, the glass slippers growing dull and fragile. The golden carriage and white horses were already beginning to transform back into their original forms. As she raced through the moonlit streets, the clock struck its final chime, and the magic vanished entirely. Cinderella was left standing in the middle of the street, breathless and disoriented, wearing nothing but the tattered remnants of her once beautiful gown. The prince, now standing at the castle gates, could only watch as she disappeared into the night, unsure of who she truly was, but certain that he had never met anyone like her before. "Wait," he called after her. "I don't even know your name." But Cinderella was already running down the grand staircase, her glass slipper slipping off in her haste. She disappeared into the night just as the final chime echoed through the valley. The search for love. The next morning, the prince announced that he would marry the woman whose foot fit the glass slipper. He and his attendants traveled from village to village, trying the slipper on every maiden. When they arrived at Cinderella's cottage, her stepsisters eagerly shoved their feet into the delicate shoe, but it was far too small. The prince's proclamation echoed through the kingdom. He would marry the woman whose foot fit the glass slipper that had been left behind at the ball. His attendants, with the prince leading the way, traveled from village to village, determined to find the mysterious maiden who had captured his heart in a single night. As they reached each cottage, the excitement in the air was palpable. Villagers gathered in anticipation, hoping for a glimpse of the prince and the woman who would be chosen to be his bride. When they finally arrived at Cinderella's cottage, her stepsisters, eager to secure the prince's favor, were the first to rush forward. The eldest stepsister, with her feet painfully stuffed into the delicate slipper, grinned triumphantly. She forced her foot into the glass shoe, wincing with every movement, but no matter how hard she tried, the slipper was far too small. Her face turned red with frustration as she tugged at the shoe, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me try," the younger stepsister cried, pushing her sibling aside. She eagerly shoved her own foot into the slipper, determined to make it fit. But just like her sister, her foot was too large, and the shoe simply wouldn't fit. The prince, watching with a mixture of curiosity and concern, shook his head. "This is not the woman I seek," he said softly, his voice filled with disappointment. Cinderella, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, stepped forward. She had been hiding in plain sight, wearing the remnants of her once glorious gown. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the prince, her eyes meeting his with a mix of hope and fear. "May I try?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. The prince, recognizing her immediately, nodded without hesitation. "Of course," he said, his voice filled with both wonder and certainty. As Cinderella gently slid her foot into the glass slipper, it fit perfectly, as though it had been made just for her. A wave of relief and joy washed over her, and the prince smiled, his heart swelling with happiness. "You are the one," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I knew it was you." Tears welled up in Cinderella's eyes as she looked at him, her heart overflowing with gratitude and love. "I never thought this day would come," she whispered. The prince reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You have been in my heart since the moment we danced," he said softly. "I've searched for you, and now I've found you." With a smile that could light up the world, Cinderella knew that her dreams were no longer just fantasies. The magic had led her to this moment, and now, her life would be filled with love, joy, and a future she had always hoped for. And so, Cinderella and the prince were married, their love story becoming the stuff of legends. The kingdom rejoiced, and the once tattered girl who had been overlooked and mistreated was finally recognized for the beautiful, kind-hearted soul she truly was. Finally, Cinderella stepped forward. "May I try?" Her stepmother scoffed. "Don't waste their time, girl." But the prince insisted. To everyone's astonishment, the slipper fit perfectly. Cinderella reached into her pocket and revealed the matching slipper, confirming her identity. A joyful reunion. The prince's face lit up with joy. "It's you. And it's you," Cinderella replied, her heart soaring. The fairy godmother appeared once more, her smile radiant. "Well done, my dear. Now go and claim your happiness." Happily ever after, Cinderella and the prince were married in a grand ceremony at the castle, but they chose to live a simple life in a charming countryside estate, surrounded by the beauty they both loved. Her stepmother and stepsisters, humbled by their experiences, sought forgiveness, and Cinderella's kind heart allowed them a chance at redemption. Cinderella and the prince's wedding was a magnificent celebration, held in the grand halls of the castle. The entire kingdom gathered to witness the union of the two souls who had been brought together by fate and magic. The air was filled with joy, laughter, and the sweet melodies of the orchestra as the couple exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all eternity. The prince, looking at Cinderella with adoration, swore to honor her kindness and strength, while she promised to always stand by his side, no matter what. However, despite the grandeur of their wedding, Cinderella and the prince chose to forego the lavish life of the palace. Instead, they sought peace and contentment in the serene beauty of the countryside, in a charming estate nestled among rolling hills and vibrant meadows. There, they lived a simple life, surrounded by nature's beauty and the love they had found in each other. The estate was a reflection of their hearts, warm, welcoming, and filled with laughter. Years passed, and their love only deepened. Cinderella, now a queen in her own right, never forgot the lessons of kindness and humility that had shaped her. She spent her days tending to the well-being of the people, always remembering the struggles she had faced and the importance of compassion. Meanwhile, her stepmother and stepsisters, who had once been cruel and dismissive, found their own paths to redemption. The weight of their past actions weighed heavily on them, and they came to realize the depth of their mistakes. Humble and regretful, they sought forgiveness from Cinderella, knowing it was the only way to heal the wounds they had caused. Cinderella, with her heart as open as ever, welcomed them with grace. She saw the sincerity in their apologies and understood that true change comes from within. With a forgiving heart, she offered them a chance at redemption, allowing them to live nearby and begin anew. Her kindness extended to them not because they deserved it, but because she believed in the power of second chances. In time, her stepmother and stepsisters, though still imperfect, learned the value of compassion and humility. They worked alongside Cinderella, helping to care for the estate and its surrounding lands. The once bitter and resentful women found peace in their newfound lives, and though they could never undo the hurt they had caused, they slowly built a relationship with Cinderella based on mutual respect and understanding. Cinderella and the prince, now content in their simple life, often sat together in the garden, watching the sunset over the fields. Their love had blossomed into something even more beautiful than they had imagined, and the kingdom, once filled with whispers of cruelty, now thrived in peace and harmony. And so, Cinderella's story was not just one of magic and transformation, but of forgiveness, redemption, and the enduring power of love. The princess who had once been a mistreated servant was now a queen, not because of the grandeur of her title, but because of the immense heart she carried within her. And in the end, it was that heart that truly made her royalty. The fields and mountains stood witness to their love, and the kingdom rejoiced in their happiness. And so, Cinderella's story became a tale of love, laughter, and the enduring power of kindness. They lived happily ever after.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine. We hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching, and keep spreading the video story.